What is up, guys? Rick Kakis here, and today it finally happened. After 7 years of waiting, the Borderlands 3 official gameplay trailer has dropped, and boy, it's everything I could have ever dreamed of. This trailer is jam-packed with so much stuff, but there's a ton of quick cuts and scenes that are only shown for a couple of frames. And so in this video, we're going to go over all of those minute details, all of the weapons that were barely shown on screen to get a better idea of the loot, and so much more. These are the things you may have missed in that Borderlands 3 official reveal trailer. And so, let's jump into it. I'm out here sounding like Philly D. Alright, firstly, we're going to freeze frame here. This gives us a really good idea of the villains within Borderlands 3. We can see what the posters are saying. Join today, answer Calypso's call. Up in the top, it says find your purpose, cleanse your something. It actually says very up in the top, gain special powers. So clearly, I think what we can deduce is that there's sort of a cult going on within the Borderlands universe led by the two baddies that we see quite a lot in the trailer. So that's kind of the motivations probably of your characters. So we continue forward with the trailer. We get a much better look at the two bad guys in the poster. We see some returning characters. We're going to see a lot in this trailer. And then we get our first full image of the 4 playable characters that are arriving at launch with Borderlands 3. And these coincide exactly with what the Borderlands 3 leaks were. So we have, starting from the left, we have a new Siren character. Then to the right of her, we have the Beastmaster. To the right of that, we have like the tech soldier. And then lastly, we have kind of the spy. And we're going to actually see what their powers are later on in the trailer. And by later, I mean almost immediately, because we see the spy character utilizing some sort of hologram double. This is similar to Borderlands the pre-sequel with Jack's double, and so likely this guy will be able to deploy, this decoy just like Zero in Borderlands 2. Then, after that, we see the Beastmaster, and we see the 3 different beasts that he can control. We have a Skag, in the back we have a Spider Ant, and then also to the right we have a monkey type thing with a gun, and that's really interesting. The Spider Ant is also giving off some sort of like electric field, a blast maybe, so that's going to be really interesting, and presumably you can choose your different guardian, your different pet essentially, depending on what you spec into. And right after that, we see the Tech Warrior with her mech in the background. So yes, you're going to be able to summon this and get into it. So it's kind of a little bit of a step up than deploying a turret. If you're Axton in Borderlands 2, you're going to be able to deploy an entire mech. Funny enough, we have to let the trailer continue a bit before we get to see what the Siren does, and yeah, that's pretty crazy. We've got 8-armed Arachno Siren over here. Now, there has been leaks that she's some sort of melee character. We're going to see later on in the trailer that she can actually hold enemies in place, a la Borderlands 2, but this is a really interesting take on the Siren character in this game. Moving on from there, we see the characters opening a key or activating a key with Tannis, and then we got a really interesting piece of gameplay. We see the mech that was summoned by the soldier, but the spy character is riding on top of that. Now, that actually means that yes, you can have a friend jump into your mech. Presumably, the soldier tech class is driving it around. The spy is just along for the ride and has a movable turret, just like a vehicle, and that's really cool. We also have the Siren utilizing what very much appears to be a Maliwan assault rifle, absent from Borderlands 2. Now, continuing from there, we have some really cool gameplay showcasing some of the changes coming to vehicles in Borderlands 3. So we see several vehicles here. The ones driven by the bad guys are just classic bandit technicals, but the one driven by the good guys looks quite a bit different. Not only is it orange, but it also has spiked wheels. I think you're going to be able to go in depth in Borderlands 3 to really customize your vehicle and give it different wheels. Perhaps the spiked ones will let it climb inclines that normal ones can't, can let it grip way more, and again, we're going to see more evidence of this later in the trailer, but just thought I would point that out to you guys. And actually, that evidence comes right now. We see this screenshot showcasing 2 different vehicles. Or are they actually different? Because if you look closely, they both have the same exact style of suspension. They both have the same exact color of their main hull. In fact, these are two of the same vehicles. One has traditional tires and the other has the hover tires. And that's what I'm talking about earlier about being able to customize your vehicle. You should be able to choose, if this is to be believed, in Borderlands 3 between normal tires on a vehicle or switching to the hover tires or maybe the spike tires and maybe even more options that we haven't seen. And that is super darn sweet. Right after that, we get a super quick frame of the Siren class utilizing their ult, and we can see the fist looks like a ground and pound slam, so perhaps creating an area of effect damage when she hits the ground. In case you're wondering, Goliaths are very much back in the game. And then, speaking of vehicles, we get a first look at a crazy one right here. It's a giant tire with guns attached to it. Exactly what I would expect for a Borderlands game. It does look like, even though only one person appears to be riding this right now, it may have room for a second person. There appears to be what may be a little bit of a chair to the side on the right, so that would be cool. Next up, we get some sweet gameplay of a crazy weapon. It's a Gatling gun, very much has bandit parts, but the glowing blue canisters on it would indicate an element, perhaps shock or maybe even cryo. Now, moving things right along, the next thing I want to stop at is right here. We see the Beastmaster holding a very AK-47 style looking weapon, and I think this is the direction that they went for Borderlands 3 involving Vladof weapons. I think Vladof weapons are going to look a little bit more like this if I was a guessing man, or we're looking at a new gun type here, a more realistic gun type, and we're going to see more examples of that coming up later. Moving things along, if you weren't yet convinced by my vehicle theory, here's even more evidence with this screen here. We see two Bandit Technicals. They are very much the same chassis, same light configuration, everything. One has spiky wheels, one has the hover wheels. So again, really seems like you can customize that feature, and I'm really excited to see what the difference is between hover, spiky, and normal, and again, whatever else they may throw at us. Moving things along, we get an even better look at the giant wheel vehicle, and this one has missiles attached in case you wanted something more ridiculous. And then right after that, we get another close look at the buggy type vehicle. Now, this is not the traditional Borderlands technical from Borderlands 1. This is something totally new. Again, the suspension really gives it away. It looks a lot more nimble, a lot more capable of taking off jumps, and so on. Then we see a bunch of vehicles jumping a bridge. We see a technical with spiky wheels, the traditional Borderlands vehicle, which of course was different than what we just saw with normal wheels, and then a technical with the hover wheels, and one with the hover wheels just keeps flying at the very end. You can see it does not come down like the other ones. Moving on from there, we have some quick pieces of gameplay showcasing some of the different environments and locations of Borderlands 3, and also utilizing some different weapons as well. So right here, we have the massive Children of the Vault, what looks like a city. This definitely appears to be the headquarters of that cult, and the weapon being used very much looks like a Torg weapon, like a Torg shotgun, for example, right out of Borderlands 2. Next up, we have a crazy, what looks like a Malawan-like city with a Malawan weapon being used, so perhaps that's hinting at its origin. And after that, we have a jungle location with a very interesting weapon, because this is super traditional in terms of most of this weapon, up to you get to the point where the barrel is a minigun. But aside from that, we've got a very classic AK-47 style chassis, so perhaps this is Vladof. The fact that it does have a minigun barrel to presumably mean increased rate of fire would help with that connection there. However, our next location has another kind of AK style looking weapon. We have that same chassis. The front has some wood furnishings, but it's a little bit more condensed, a little bit more close quarters, if you will. Perhaps this is actually something bandit, or perhaps just two different versions of a Vladof gun. And continuing the trailer along, we see a bunch of awesome stuff. A giant metal skeleton, they're fighting in some sort of arena. A darn dinosaur chasing a vehicle around. And then we have this screen here I wanted to stop on. We have some interesting stuff shown. Firstly, Siren is using a low-level Torg shotgun like right out of Borderlands 2. Then to the left, we have the spy using something totally different, perhaps a sniper rifle. It's giving me some doll vibes, but I'm not 100% sure. And the enemies they're fighting, Varkits, those are returning. And moving on from there, we have what would be incredibly weird in any other trailer, but in Borderlands it fits perfectly, an epic sax solo, and then, this is probably obvious for a lot of you, but just in case, we have Brick to the left, Mordecai to the right, and in the middle, that is grown-up Tiny Tina. So this takes place, obviously, after Borderlands 2. Continuing our stroll through memory lane, we see a bunch more characters, including, interestingly, Zero with the Atlas Corporation, which is pretty cool. And the fact that we see Atlas here means that potentially we're getting Atlas as another gun manufacturer back in Borderlands 3, and that would explain some of the weapons that you can't really fit into one of the Borderlands 2 manufacturers. Atlas, of course, was in Borderlands 1, dropped for Borderlands 2, it may return in the third. And moving on from there, we have the big finale, and this was just begging for a breakdown. It flashes only a few frames of all these different weapons after bragging that there are billions of guns in Borderlands 3, over a billion. Oh my goodness, let's break them all down. And right off the bat, we have what very much appears to be a doll assault rifle shooting a fire element. But here's what's really interesting. Look at the sight. And off to the right of it, we have, that's a 2x magnifier. That is like an optional 2x magnifier you would find in a Battlefield 4 style game. Does that mean you can actually have the option to flip that over, magnify your ADS in Borderlands 3? That would be insane. Borderlands 2 really didn't mess around with sights too much. You had just a sight that randomly spawned with a weapon or hideous iron sights. Giving you the option to do things like that would be really stepping up the sight game in terms of the loot in Borderlands 3. So I hope that's actually functional and not just there for looks. Now moving on from there, we have, I don't even know what the heck this is. It's very dark and this thing looks crazy. Let's just jump to the next one. This makes a lot more sense. This is very much giving me Vladov sniper rifle vibes. I'm sure other people may be getting that as well. We've got what looks like a high magnification sight. We've got the wood varnishings, which is traditional in a Vladov weapon. So that's what I would say this definitely is. But after that, we have something that is definitely not so traditional. It's clearly a Maliwan weapon, but it's shooting a goop cannon. Look at the actual projectile coming out of this gun. It's a lava flow. I almost want to say a laser, but it's definitely got a lot more physics to it. It's flopping around, and this seems sweet. It really does seem like a lava laser in Borderlands 3. And after that, going from crazy to, what is this, Call of Duty? This is the most normal, traditional looking shotgun I've ever seen in a Borderlands game. This is crazy. Perhaps this is a new gun type. Perhaps Atlas is coming back with much more realistic style weapons. Or maybe this is like a Jacobs shotgun. They're taking a much more traditional approach with that manufacturer in Borderlands 3. Regardless, pretty interesting seeing this style of weapon here. Now after that, we see a shot of something being reloaded. Unfortunately, really hard to tell exactly what this is, so moving on. Well, we have something really cool. It's a grenade launcher. Yup, grenade launchers in Borderlands 3. You can see the slow-moving, arcing projectile mid-flight. And not only that, it's elemental. It's a fire elemental weapon, which is really sweet. There's a couple more things going on with this weapon as well. So, number one, it actually belongs to the Vladov manufacturer. You can see there's a little holographic ammo counter, which shows 2, and beside that, that star, that downward pointing star, that's actually the star in the V that comes up in the Vladov logo. So this is going to be an extremely common thing that we're going to see moving on. These guns that have very slow moving projectiles, and that is something that they seem to have really played up on in Borderlands 3, differentiating the projectiles, not just making them pure hit scan weapons, but having, different speeds of moving projectiles, having gooping projectiles like we've already seen. Be prepared for a lot of that. After that, we have a weapon being reloaded, and if I was to guess, I would say this is a Torg shotgun. You have the massive shells, and then the barrel is very much the same massive wide shape that you get with a traditional Torg shotgun. And right after that, we have something really cool. Not the weapon, it's clearly a low-level doll pistol, but actually what's going on in the background, you can see the siren that a hand, similar to those glowing hands that we saw her activate around her, is coming up and trapping this enemy. So that's going to be the Borderlands 3 version of the siren's ability. So perhaps you can have a bunch of different stuff, your melee focus, your ground and pounding, but you also apparently, at least if you spec into certain skills, have the ability to, just like in Borderlands 2, grab enemies, slow them down, make them hover in midair so you can just lay into them with damage. Next up, we have what is clearly a Hyperion weapon. We see the yellow and everything, but what isn't so clear is exactly what this is. Definitely looks SMG-like, but very different from the Borderlands 2 SMGs. Maybe it's a pistol, but we'll have to wait and see. Next up, we have another very darn traditional looking weapon, similar to that shotgun we saw earlier, but because we see a little bit more of this one, I am really leaning towards Jacobs. We can see the cylindrical revolver style magazine right here, and that is just such a marquee thing of Jacobs to have everything having those cylinders. So again, perhaps Jacobs got a little bit of a redesign, and this is what their weapons are going to look like in Borderlands 3. Next up, we have the most obtrusive darn weapon I've ever seen. It takes up half your screen. I don't exactly know what the heck this thing is, but something interesting that does give a little bit of information away is that it does have the same flaps that are at the front of the gun as are traditional in iridium weapons from Borderlands 2. Like if you have a plasma caster in Borderlands 2, you have those same exact flaps that will open up and close as you're shooting the weapon. Perhaps iridium style guns are making a return in Borderlands 3, and this is one of them. Now after that, we have an interesting little weapon here. Its boxy yet simple design makes me maybe think Tediore, but if you look at what it's shooting, it's actually slow moving fire projectiles, almost like a tinderbox from Borderlands 2. So again, with those differentiating projectiles appearing in yet another example here. Moving on from there, we have another absolutely crazy looking weapon. What's interesting here is actually near the front, the barrels of the weapon. We have the normal barrel in the middle, then we have what looks like almost another barrel on top, and then a grenade launcher on the bottom. Is that a working grenade launcher? Can guns come with grenade launchers in Borderlands 3? That's a definite possibility. And if that wasn't enough, there's a bayonet on this weapon at the very front as well. So just a lot of things going on here. Next up, we have this image here, and unfortunately, again, mid-reload, just not enough information for what is going on here. Next up, however, we do have what is clearly a Maliwan-looking gun, and it has that same barrel as we saw with the lava laser earlier, and the background, there's a lot of Maliwan stuff going on. Maliwan in the background, Maliwan signs up front. Perhaps this is inside that Maliwan-looking city that we saw near the beginning of the trailer. And next up, we have this SMG. Now, I'm a little perplexed by this gun. Firstly, I thought the rail and sight were actually floating above the gun, and they very well might be. However, there could also be a clip off to the side I can't see. I'm getting some doll vibes because of the digital black and gray camo that we have seen in a few other examples, but maybe this is something totally new. If those sights are actually floating above the gun, maybe that's Atlas. They're the one with the best, most advanced technology out there, right? Next up, we are back in familiar territory. This is clearly a Borderlands 2 style Maliwan SMG being reloaded. But then we have about as far from traditional as you could possibly get. This crazy contraption is maybe the thing that we couldn't tell earlier, the second weapon in this montage. You can see a hand right here, and the rest of the weapon is off to the side. This is almost as if you're holding the hand of a mech, but I don't think this is from inside of the mech skill that we saw with the tech soldier. I think this is just a gun type you can get, a massive looking gun type, because, you know, we don't see the other half of the mech, obviously, and we can see it shooting its projectiles, like slow moving, lobbing projectiles. This is, I think, another example of some of the grenade launchers that you can get in Borderlands 3. And after that, we have another possible example of a grenade launcher, but a very different version of it, shooting what appears to be a slow-moving ice projectile. And this is perhaps our first really good look at the fact that cryo is likely returning as an element in Borderlands 3. I mean, I can't think of what else this is. It really doesn't look electric, it looks cryo. Now here's the interesting thing, the width of this weapon, the airplane style sights, the back receiver if you can see, and those original iron sights, that all screams Torg, right? But Torg is not known for its elemental weapons. Perhaps that's actually changing in Borderlands 3. Perhaps we're going to see elemental Torg weapons, or at least with an elemental gun archetype like a grenade launcher where everything is already explosive, then we can start having Torg weapons with elements. But that's another big development in this one little screenshot. Next up, we have what looks like an RPG round attached to a stick, basically. I don't know what's going on here. Next up, we have another example of those massive cannons where you can see your arm holding almost like a joystick, this time shooting a little bit different projectiles that seem to be spreading out. After that, we have a really interesting one. And I'm actually re-recording this because I said this was a different manufacturer in my original take. It looks so different than your traditional Hyperion weapons, especially the gold coloring. It's a lot darker than the Hyperion yellow. But the new Hyperion SMG-like weapons are built almost identically to this, and you'll see an example later on in the montage. This could still be something different, perhaps a Hyperion weapon, but a different gun type, like a laser beam or a plasma cannon. Moving on, we have this crazy one. Now, the camo screams doll as usual, but the rest of this gun basically really does not. This is potentially like a shotgun almost. If you look near the front, it looks like a group of projectiles, but maybe this was just shot one after another, and this is just the result of a bit of shots over time. But interestingly, also, if you look at the sight, we have just a traditional red dot sight, something we almost never saw in Borderlands 2, and this is going to make guns a lot easier to aim and get precision shots on with Borderlands 3. And next up we have, what the heck is this? It's like a 20mm cannon that is basically being used as a rocket launcher. We have what appears to be these slow-moving projectiles it shoots. Almost kind of looks like those don't belong coming out of this gun. This looks like a mega sniper. Perhaps that's what it actually is, and these projectiles are from something else, but absolutely crazy looking gun here. It's like a rocket launcher crossed with a sniper rifle. But if you thought that was crazy, next up, oh my goodness, I don't know what this is. I have no idea. This is definitely not from Borderlands 2. If anything, this harkens back to Borderlands 1 with those alien technology weapons. The front part of this weapon is clearly weird, organic, alien something, and it's shooting a sustained laser beam. So the Borderlands pre-sequel introduced lasers. Those are potentially returning in Borderlands 3, and that's very exciting. Now, after that, we have this absolutely hideous looking gun. What the heck is going on here? Now, this is again a Vladov weapon. We have that same ammo counter as we saw on the grenade launcher, but this I think shows how many different attachments you can get on your weapon. We have the minigun style front, we have a sight, we have that massive tubular thing. I guess maybe it's not a grenade launcher as I somewhat saw before. We have a massive side box magazine, or I should say drum magazine off to the right. We just have so many different things going on this weapon, and that means much more variety in Borderlands 3. Next up, no idea what's going on here. Then we have kind of a boring looking pistol staring at a loot chest. Now, the one thing I want to draw your attention to within the loot chest up in the top right hand corner, we very much have what appears to be like a wrist attachment. We have this spherical or circular type thing that looks like it goes on your wrist, and that's kind of what we keep seeing with those massive guns. Now, this looks a lot smaller than those, but perhaps those wrist launched or joystick style weapons are going to be appearing a lot more in Borderlands 3. And moving on from there, we have this crazy looking weapon. Now, this reminds me of a World War II fighter jet, and that means Torg. Torg and the Flak especially have this same exact vibe, and that's really interesting actually. Now, it should be noted, this, as well as the other weapons we have looked at, and as well as the weapons we're still going to look at, could be a legendary weapon. This could be something that's very abnormal, that doesn't just spawn randomly, but it also could just spawn randomly, and maybe this is a new gun type, maybe this is a new type of Torg weapon. We'll just have to wait and see. Then we have what very much looks like a Jacob's pistol, and after that we have another one of the absolutely crazy sniper rifle slash rocket launcher combos. Again, we see a slow moving projectile in the distance coming completely off of where the barrel is pointed. I don't know what's going on there. Perhaps they're very slow moving after you shoot them, and then so the person had the chance to aim his sights at something else. And this projectile, coupled with the last projectile that we saw earlier, I doubt people are just randomly shooting other guns every time we see this weird sniper rifle rocket launcher combo. So I would say that slow moving projectile is what comes out of this thing. And the element, it could be corrosive, but it's a slightly different hue, This could actually be nuclear. Now, there was a leak a while back that said one of the new elements was nuclear, and, all of the leaked characters we actually do see in this trailer. So that leak is potentially true as well, and this is a different type of element. Next up, we have what definitely looks like a doll weapon, perhaps another doll assault rifle, or potentially an SMG. This does look a little bit more compact than that first doll assault rifle that we saw. And yet again, we have that 2x magnification increaser hanging off to the side. Again, I wonder if that's actually usable. After that, we have a really cool screen. Firstly, apparently Cabal phalanxes are in this game too. We have a gun that emits a really sweet sight, and it looks like it has shields off to the right and left side, potentially that will protect from incoming fire. That's what it very much appears to be. And also, we got a foot. The foot of your character off to the left-hand side of the screen. And that would indicate some sort of sliding mechanic as this guy is sliding forward. And we're going to see a couple more examples of that later in this montage. So that's all very cool. Then we have another example of one of those joystick-style grenade or missile launchers. Now after that, we have what appears to be just a lower-level Vladov assault rifle. And this looks very similar to what Vladov weapons did in Borderlands 2, and that kind of goes against what I'm saying with the Vladov potential redesign and the more AK-47 style receivers and the wood varnishings, but perhaps this is just showcasing level difference, and this is a white weapon and the ones we saw previously were purple weapons. Next up, we have a pretty normal, what appears to be a low-level pistol. Hard to tell exactly what manufacturer this is. Now, after that, we have a very interesting weapon being reloaded. It's giving me Maliwan vibes, but I'm not 100% sure. This is not similar to, your normal Maliwan SMG. Perhaps it's a laser or plasma caster style weapon. Next up, we have another very traditional looking weapon. I'm still going to go with these as being Jacob's weapons. After that, we have what appears to be maybe a doll or a Vladov assault rifle right here. Actually, I'm going to go with doll because yet again, we see that 2x magnifier. And the more I see it, the more I'm starting to think it's not usable because we never see it actually being used. Also, we see the leg of our character and we're close to the ground. We're performing a slide in this screenshot. After that, pretty clearly a Jacob's pistol. But then after that, what the heck is this? This is like a cannonball launcher, I guess? Maybe this is a new style of rocket launcher we can get in the game. We see the joystick, but it's on kind of the different hand over to the right. That massive, what looks like a slag purple projectile seems to have been shot by this thing. Definitely seems to be very slow moving. So, cannonballs as a new gun type, I guess? But moving on from there, we see another weapon similar to that World War II airplane style. This one we get a much better look at, and actually at the front it says explosive. So it's pointing to this being a Torg weapon. However, if you look at the little light indicators, they definitely appear to be very similar to that other weapon that I previously talked about as being potentially nuclear. So this could be another nuclear style weapon or just corrosive. That orangish greenish is what you get for that. Next up, we finally have what appears to be a bandit weapon. It's very rusty, clunky. You see like a bike chain being used to move something, so this definitely screams bandit to me. And next up, we see a pistol or potentially even an SMG here. Now, the digital camo again says doll, but it's kind of the same appearance as that one I said maybe was an Atlas weapon earlier. It does look a little bit sharper than your traditional dolls, so really interested to see what this is as well. And after that, we have what might be another bandit weapon, but an absolutely crazy one. This looks like another cannonball launcher weapon. In fact, we actually see it shoot its projectile in just the few frames we get, and it very much appears to be shooting a cannonball. Now, maybe this is just a different version of grenade launchers. Maybe grenade launchers have light grenade launchers, heavy grenade launchers, this being obviously on the heavy side. Really interesting what they're doing with the weapons in Borderlands 3. After that, we have a pistol, and this does give me some Jacobs vibes. However, little fancy for Jacobs, especially that little flare near the sight. So pretty interesting. And then after that, we have, okay, this is crazy. So I would say this is a Malawan gun. It's giving me Malawan vibes for sure. Massive gun, but we see some weird moving projectiles. You can actually see the traces of where they've been, and they seem like they're bending around. They're not going straight. They're slow moving. And again, we see those iridium weapon style of flaps near the front of this gun. So another indication that this is actually an iridium weapon, which would explain the slow moving, strange, likely harder hitting projectiles. Next up, remember the Hyperion gun that didn't look like a Hyperion gun and may be a totally different manufacturer, may be a different gun type for Hyperion? Here's another example. Equally confusing, doesn't really look Hyperion here, has some factors of it, but yeah, there's another one. Then after that, we see another torpedo style weapon, and there's been enough of these that perhaps this isn't Torg. This is either a whole different branch of Torg, perhaps these are all examples of grenade launchers or assault rifles, or Torg is getting somewhat of a redesign, but we clearly saw some old school Torg examples like old Torg shotguns and so on. Maybe this is a different manufacturer altogether. It does say explosive near the front again, so I really don't know what to think. Then look at this absolute monstrosity. This is clearly a bandit weapon, but what the heck is going on here? There's little flips and dials on the left-hand side. This looks absolutely crazy. But moving on from there, something a little bit simpler. We have clearly a Hyperion weapon. We see the Hyperion coloring fighting a crazy demon thing. Anyways, moving on. Then we have what appears to be a Malawan pistol shooting yet another example of one of those slow-moving projectiles, in this case, a corrosive orb through the air. And interestingly, if you look at the hue of this weapon, look at the color of this weapon, if that's corrosive, that is definitely more green than the yellow that I was saying was nuclear. If you go back and look at those pictures, it's definitely different color hues. And so that would indicate two different styles of elements. After that, we have another example of the joystick-controlled grenade launcher or rocket launcher. And after that, finally one that doesn't require guesswork. This is a TDR weapon, and you can tell that because you can actually see the TDR logo right across it. Now, this looks a little bit different, especially when you look at the barrel. It has kind of an underbarrel, and this it very much appears to be like a laser or a plasma rifle or something like that, rather than like a traditional SMG. And lastly, we have what very much appears to be a doll pistol. And that's gonna round out that super flashy montage. Man, they really showed a lot of guns in a very short amount of time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed me breaking down all of this stuff. You guys got a better example of the loot in Borderlands 3. That's my specialty. I am such a looter guy. I love loot, getting loot within the game. So that's kind of why I focus this video, this breakdown, on looking at all the different examples of the manufacturers, of the weapon styles, all that stuff in the game. So hopefully you guys are excited. I know I definitely am. The fact that you can spot so many differences, colossal differences in weapons in this trailer when compared to old Borderlands has got me very excited, guys. That's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed and found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Borderlands 3 content, be sure to slap that subscribe button. And if you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.